Welcome to Loud and Clear, a podcast dedicated to amplifying the voices of women in music. I'm your host, Olivia Adams, and I'm excited to talk to three guests today. Today, I get to talk with the co-founders of a Canadian music collective, Redleaf Pianoworks. Their founders are Martha Hill Duncan, Susan Griesdale, and Beverly Porter, and Rebekah Maxner was invited to join later on. Redleaf Pianoworks is a female-founded self-publishing collective of award-winning composers who share a passion for creating new repertoire for today's students. They have a diverse collection of piano music with a variety of composers from across Canada, the US, and the UK. And their music includes varying styles, genres, and levels, ranging from pre-readers to advanced piano music. Welcome, Martha, Susan, and Rebekah. It's so good to be speaking with you today. How are you all doing?
Thanks for having us.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
So before we get started, do you mind just introducing yourself so that our audience can connect a voice with a name? And then also give us a brief background on how you became a pianist and then a piano composer. So if you don't mind, Martha, could we start with you?
Okay. Well, I'm a transplanted Texan who married a Canadian, so I came a little late to this beautiful country, but I started out taking a lesson with a friend when I was about seven years old, and the big sister sat me down at this beautiful grand piano in their living room and traced my little fingers and showed me how to put them together. And I went home. I just was so thrilled, and I said to my family, that's it. I got to learn how to play the piano. And there were 5 kids in the family, not a lot of money. My older siblings still say, spoiled, spoiled, spoiled. They did get a piano. And I always tell the story about the piano arriving in the driveway and my mother climbing up on the cart that was carrying the piano up to the house and sitting down and playing like a professional. And I had no idea that my mother knew how to play the piano. And she played by ear and had grown up in the country. And she, it was all honky-tonk kind of Texas religious music. But that was the beginning. And then, of course, I took lessons. I took from a really fantastic teacher who gave me a pencil and a piece of manuscript paper and said, if you're not going to follow the rules, go home and write your own music. And she got me started because I was a rebel. So grateful for all those early connections. Yeah.
That's great. And Susan, what about you?
Well, I have a completely different start in that I started composing music before I started taking piano lessons. For me, it's a very, very strong urge to create, just being very creative. And that also goes with art. I love doing art. I love doing drawings. It's a very big part of me. So I did study piano. I got my ARCT. I do teach, but I'm not a performer because I did start learning piano quite late in life, but the urge to create something is very strong within me, and it's always been there. So, as I said, I started writing music before I started taking piano lessons. It's in my head, it's in my soul, and just I have to kind of control it a little bit sometimes. So I don't go way back like Martha does. I really started piano in my 30s, but since then I've been completely hooked to music and teaching and everything. So the only performing I do is when we have a trade show and I have to get up and perform some of the music that we're presenting in the presentation. So that's it.
Wonderful. That's great. And Rebekah?
My story is a little more similar to Martha because I'm from a large family. And when I was a toddler, some of my siblings were in their teens and they were already playing Haydn sonatas and Chopin nocturnes. And they were practicing these beautiful pieces on the piano. And I heard them and it hooked me. And so I would toddle up to the piano and improvise. And people would say, oh my goodness, it sounds like she's really playing something. So I was improvising before I even took lessons. And actually my sister became my first piano teacher. She came to me and said, do you want to take piano lessons? And I was like, yes. And so we had this little bond as sisters for 10 years before I went on to other teachers. And she was the one who introduced me to the movie Amadeus. And we were just doing music all the time. And so it was kind of like a no-brainer for me. I just, from a very young age, wanted to be a professional composer. And so I leaned more towards being a composer than a performer. But I have performed, I used to play for church and stuff. I can be a performing musician, but I really do. I'm kind of an introvert. I really like just being in my own little musical world at my piano at night when an idea strikes me and I just kind of run with it. And Paul just takes the cats away and left me in the room. And he just, he gives me my space like that. It's wonderful. So that's kind of where I got my start.
That's great. I love hearing that. I always love asking that question because each musician has a unique path to how they got to where they are today. It's just a great reminder that that there's not one right path to take to becoming a musician. Well, can you tell us when Redleaf was founded and how it came about? So what was the impetus for starting this sort of self-publishing collective?
Well, I was living in Kingston. I had just come here from the States with my husband. I had 2 small children. I had been in Toronto for 5 years before that. Then we'd gone to California. My husband is an academic, so we were chasing jobs across North America. So we wound up in Kingston. It's a small city. It's full of musicians, but because I wasn't associated with the university and I hadn't met a lot of people, I was writing in this little quiet, cocoon of my own. I felt so lonely, and the internet was just getting started. You were starting to hear about email and that kind of thing. I'm dating myself here. But then what happened is I became a member of ORMTA, and I met Beverly Porter, who was also writing in her little quiet space. And, we'd keep each other up to date on what was going on. If there was a competition in Toronto that we could, submit stuff to, or if there was an opportunity for composers or piano writing and that kind of thing. And one day it hit me, this is such a lonely life, this composing, and it makes me so discouraged. And I approached her, I said, can I take you out for brunch? And unfortunately, the cafe that we had our brunch is gone now, but every time I'd pass it, I'd say, that was the place where it all started. But we went out for brunch, and I said to her, I'm so lonely, I need support. Why don't we get together and provide each other, encouragement, some critiquing of each other's works, playing for one another. And that's all I had. It was just the 2 of us and supporting each other within the community of Kingston. And then in a couple of days, she called me back and said, why don't we get together and go to Summer Sizzle? And you'll know Summer Sizzle because it's put on by CNCM and Deb Wanless. And I said, okay, I'll go to Summer Sizzle with you. So we drove to some small town in southeastern Ontario, I can't remember. And she introduced me to Susan Griesdale. And so Beverly Porter really had the vision of community. I just had the vision of, I need some help. The minute we met Susan, she had all this imagination. She had the great mind to be able to see what could come of it. That was the start. And it was just crazy from there. We just really encouraged one another. And, Susan, you can take over. We had hundreds of ideas about what we would call ourselves and all that. But I'll let you go from there, Susan.
Well, we did have this idea of putting together sort of a group. And we did think about the idea of it being a collective right from the get-go. And I got right into trying to create the logo, the red leaf. And I have probably about 50 different leaves. I've held on to them. They were all red. I guess it took us a short time to come up with Redleaf Pianoworks. We had other names as well, but I came up with the leaf, and it just kind of ballooned out of there. The ideas came pretty quickly from me and Bev and Martha. And then shortly after that, Martha said, you know what? I think, Martha, you were adjudicating in the East Coast. You met Rebekah. Yeah. I think that. Yeah. So you suggested inviting Rebekah, and we thought, oh, that's great. There'll be more of us. So yes, it kind of balloons from there.
Yeah. And Rebekah, you can.
I'm interested in hearing your side of that story, Martha. I'm interested in hearing how that happened for you, how we met.
Well, teachers are so proud of the people they know who are creating. If you're a piano teacher and you're teaching music, you are so impressed with your friends who are composing or who are creating things because, you love to play, but you don't have that creative, impetus or whatever in your mind. And so I gave a talk. I was examining for RCM, and I think in Annapolis, maybe. Is that the right?
I think it was in
Wolfville. And so I gave a talk about my music and composing, and I think I had a piece on the RCM list at that time. And this woman came up to me, and I can't remember her name, but she said, you have to meet Rebekah Maxner. And I said, Rebekah Maxner of Blue Train? And she said, yes, Rebekah Maxner of Blue Train. And I said the title right, Rebekah?
Yeah. That's the one that I think CNCM published in their book. Yeah.
Yeah. And just as a creative person and a musical person, sometimes you see a piece and it can be very small and very, low level, but it has this creative spark to it that just, and I said, yeah, I have to meet this Rebekah Maxner. So my husband and I managed to drive out to Handsforth during that quick time that I was in Nova Scotia. And I burst in upon her with a brand new baby. And I'll let you take it from there, Rebekah.
Yeah, my youngest was 2 weeks old when Martha came in, and I was thrilled to meet, a composer. And when you are a composer and your music hasn't been published yet, and you're barely even confident enough to ask your own students to learn your pieces, because that's where I was at the time. I was composing these little pieces, wondering if anybody would like them, and wondering if they were even worthy of being educated educational pieces, because educational pieces, there are certain really specific things that you can and cannot do with an educational piece. So that's when Martha came on the scene, and I had my new little born baby, and she came in, and it was just really affirmative that, wow, even if I only have one piece out there, someone has noticed and someone has recommended me. And it made me feel really great as a composer, like maybe I can do this. And it took me a couple of years after that before I was able to publish anything, because my daughter was very young and I was kind of focusing on teaching piano and taking care of my family. But that was amazing for me to be invited to join this group.
That was around 2009, something like that?
Clara was born in 2008.
Okay, so 2008.
And I published my first book, Old MacDonald Had the Blues, in 2010. It was 2 years later.
Right. And I remember encountering Martha's pieces and Rebekah's pieces when I was a very early teacher. I think I was 15 years old when I started teaching, which is kind of wild to me, because who trusts, their child's piano lessons with a 15-year-old? But anyway, I'm very grateful for those early years. And then when I was taking lessons with Allison Weem after I had already moved to Ontario, and she saw this sort of passion that I had for teaching, and she said, you have to teach Susan's works. And so she said, I'll have some for you tomorrow. And so I come to her office to go pick them up, and there's just this stack of music. And so I took it home and I played through it, and I was like, this is fantastic. And so I was familiar with your works. I remember teaching, I believe it was Old MacDonald Had the Blues, Rebekah, like when I was an early teacher, and of course, Blue Train. I remember that one as well.
That's great. That's so fantastic to hear. Thanks.
So when you're growing this composers collective, how do you make those decisions on who to add, how fast to grow, at kind of what rate you're printing the music? I'd imagine there's a lot of factors that you have to consider as a group.
I can give my perspective on that. We are all self-published composers. So as a group, we don't publish any other person's work but our own. As a collective, we make a unanimous decision on who joins the collective. And Martha, you can take it from there.
In the early days, we weren't as fussy, Rebekah. I'm just teasing. But, in the early days, when you're just starting out, you're looking for like-minded people. And it just so happened, we were so lucky that we brought in people who had different compositional voices and who had a different approach. We didn't want to clone ourselves. We really wanted unique members, and we wanted to spread the joy geographically. We didn't want everybody to be from Ontario. So in those early days, we were looking for people to recommend. I remember Janet Geek, somebody approached us at a conference. It was Peggy Loire, I think, and said, you've got to see Janet Geek's music. So lots of times we would be told about composers. I think the funniest composer that we brought on, we were all women for a long time. I think we were up to maybe 8 or something. And my colleague, Dr. John Burge from Queen's University, he called me one day and said, I'd like to take you out for lunch. It's all about going out for lunch in Kingston. And so he took me out for lunch, and he said, okay, listen, I've heard about this Redleaf Pianoworks, and I think you need to ask me, because I don't think it's fair to just have women in this organization. So I said, well, I'll discuss it with my colleagues and see. And of course, he's a fantastic composer. And after that male composer, we also asked Peter Rudzik out of Calgary, who's fantastic. And the other way we found Teresa Rickert was out of BC was Bev Porter has this incredible memory. And she is older. She's been around a while, but she knows what's going on. She's on the internet. She remembers everybody. And she called us one day and said, we need to look at this Teresa Rickert out of BC. She's doing some amazing things. And then our UK composer, June Armstrong, Bev introduced us to her too. And she was in Canada for a visit. And we asked her to Kingston so we could meet her out of the UK. And so this is the way we've been bringing people in. It's not that we're necessarily looking, but when somebody comes up. And also we have submission process, and we have brought in some composers through the submission process. Irene Boros out of BC. Joanne Bender, we begged for her to come because we love her music. And she finally succumbed to our insistence that she join us. But now that we get submissions and we have to decide, now if I was asking to come to Redleaf as a composer back then, I might not have been taken on, because of course, the more competent you become, the more enthusiastic and more initiative you take, that's better for our group, because we're all volunteers and nobody's paying anybody. So we use multiple talents from each of the composers.
I think an important point as well when we bring on composers is that we are a collective, and the decision has to be unanimous. And I think that is a really important thing to keep us together as a collective and working as a group.
Yeah. And it's such a
whenever we make a new decision, we always put out the questions, and then there's a bit of a discussion. And so I think the discussion brings out really interesting points because we all have really different perspectives. And so that's what I really like about it, that there's always a conversation going on whenever there's a new decision being made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love the model that you guys are bringing because it's something so unique. It's not something that you often see. Usually there's a publishing house, right? And then certain composers get brought on and they get paid royalties. But the fact that everyone in the collective is self-published, and then you also do some collections together. Is that correct? I mean, I know like I use the Saplings collection. I love that one. It's some of, my students, their favorite festival pieces often come from that collection. So could you tell us about some of those group projects that you guys take on?
Okay. Sprouts was the beginning one, then Saplings, then Branches. And Branches has just come out. We've just finished editing it and putting it out there. And the reason we did this is because some of us are better known than others, and it didn't feel fair that we would go to trade shows and, push our music. We want to show everybody. We're trying to get everybody out there because you can't have a collective if only a couple of people are shining. You want everybody to shine and be able to show their music. And so the anthology was a way of getting everybody in the same book. And if a teacher or a student bought the book, they were able to get a glimpse of all 13 composers right away. Mm-hmm. And that's been fantastic. We are feeling really excited because we've just launched the Branches one at the ORMTA convention in Kingston recently. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you guys also had, with the launch of the new RCM syllabus, a lot of Redleaf composers were included. Could you tell us more about that and what composers were represented and where can they find their music?
I think all the composers are represented except for two, and we're hoping next time around they will be involved. Mm-hmm. So yes, we have Redleaf composers at all levels of the syllabus, I think. And we do have a list of all the pieces included in the syllabus. It's on our website. I think it's under the catalog tab. And I think, Rebekah, also on your website, you have a list of all of the Redleaf works that are in the syllabus. So it's actually quite a few.
That's great.
I did a blog post on this. It's my most popular blog post of the entire year. I get so many hits, and there's a free printable on the Redleaf site as well as on my site. On the
Absolutely. Printable. So I will link that in the show notes. That's great. And I remember when you released that blog post and I was download immediately because that's a really helpful guide for not just RCM exams, but also Conservatory Canada, Northern Lights exams, just to know that students can use them and they've been graded and looked over. So that's wonderful. What do you think are some specific challenges that are facing the publishing world right now in music publishing? Like, has COVID had an impact on the industry? And how can we as music lovers and music teachers support your collective so that you can continue to put out, wonderful musical works?
Well, I think one of the big problems for us is that once you get online teaching, which we were forced to do with the COVID, all of a sudden the hardcover piece of music ceases to be so important. So, of course, sales plummeted for everybody. Even my choir, when we were doing online choiring, you couldn't even see the people. So there was a lot of, printable PDFs going around. And of course, we love the downloaded PDFs. And of course, all of us are doing that. We want to make sure that our hardcover books get in every student's hands. So that's been a real challenge. And also, we were planning on doing a big launch of our American composer, Win-Ann Rossi, at the MTNA conference in Minnesota. I think it was last year, 2021. And they closed it down right before it went. And so
I remember that.
Amazing. Yeah, so disappointing. Yeah. I think people have really done a great job of figuring out how to use the internet and to use online teaching through Zoom and different platforms. But, being in person, handing that piece of music, writing on with a pencil, we're missing out on that. And also on the sales. And it's not just us, it's everybody.
Yeah. It's really hit the industry hard, I think, for music especially.
And also, just to say, my choir, all these choral composers, they haven't been able to get their music out. They haven't had in-person performances. It's not just, piano teachers and, it's live music everywhere. And people, at least on the internet, you're seeing a lot of people having to change their way of earning a living, where they would be going and giving a presentation, or they'd be giving a master class. They'd be paid travel and accommodations and per diem and all that, and that's part of their livelihood as a musician. Now they're stuck to a Zoom, presentation where they get paid a minimal amount for the hour that they're doing the Zoom. It's a totally different ballgame, I think.
Absolutely. And I mean, even myself, I was booked for 2 years to speak at the University of Michigan, and it was going to be my first paid, travel. They're going to pay me to speak, they pay for my hotel, all this. I was so excited because, of course, I'd been doing workshops for, $70, $100, and I was working my way up. And I was so pumped to be, finally, I get to do my first. And then they closed the border, and so I absolutely sympathize with that. And you're right. We've had to get really creative at making money. Luckily, musicians tend to be really good at that, at being really creative.
I think through COVID that some musicians have had more maneuverability than some of the bigger organizations, like Alfred Piano shut down their piano department entirely. And so they're only promoting books that they've already produced. They're not producing any more piano books. And so for me, as one, I started an e-sheet club. So going to the downloadable PDF format. And I haven't published a hardcover book since COVID started. Right. So as a self-published composer, we do have that ability to quickly pivot if we need to a different format. And I think all of us have been trying a little harder to get our books out there in ebook format.
I think our digital downloads have really increased all across Redleaf composers in the last 2 years. So.
For teachers who want to be supporting that and want to be sort of transitioning to digital downloads just because they were teaching online and things like that, does Redleaf offer options for studio licensing?
Yes, I think that we have our anthologies available in PDF, ebooks, right, Susan? Yeah, the anthologies are, and each composer on their own website has all the downloads available personally. So if you go to mine, you can filter by grade and difficulty, and you can get hard copy or studio license or an e-piece. And I think everybody else is doing the same thing. I think they're very affordable. I mean, we all know when you want that piece of music, you want that piece of music. Being, I want it now. I wanted it yesterday. So, for a long time, I think we really suffered about that because we love our books. We love our covers. There's something about the feel of a book and opening up on your piano. It's just, there's nothing like it. But the truth is, things move so fast. Lessons are so quick. You can't let a kid go for 2 weeks not having their book because the parents can't get to the store. It's just instant demand. So we have to keep up with that. And all I think we ask from teachers is that they make their students understand that this is a product. It's created by somebody. It's not something that you copy over and over again and share. It's something you purchase. So maybe by the teacher buying the expensive book, it's $20 or whatever, then the teacher can say, look, you can go to Rebekah's website or Susan's website and download the piece that we're interested in. You don't have to buy the whole book. So I think teaching responsibility to the students is huge. And maybe Rebekah and Susan have a feeling about that too.
In terms of promotion, I think certainly having students perform any Redleaf piece in festivals, music festivals, recitals, and endorsements from the teacher, especially on things like social media and Facebook. That's very powerful and very supportive of, I imagine, any composer's works. So that's when that happens, we're all sharing it to each other, say, look what so-and-so said. It's very exciting. So that's very helpful.
I'm always thrilled when I adjudicate a music festival and I see our names pop up. I'm always very thrilled. And I'm very proud then to tell the audience and the parents and the teachers and students, I know this person personally. It really makes connections. I love our group for that reason, that it has really connected these composers together and around the world now. And you are able to, through your own connection, bring the students and the parents and the teachers into that connection too. It's wonderful.
And I just want to say there are so many talented young composers coming about in Canada. I could list you a name that have sent me their works, and some of them are just getting started. Some of them are a little bit deeper into it. If I had enough energy, I'd say, come. Because we're a volunteer organization, we have a limited amount of effort that we can put into it and time we can put into it. There are a lot of really worthwhile composers out there, young composers. So I think for all of their benefits, explore new music. Don't be afraid of a new name. Do some investigation. Where did they come from? How did they come about? Maybe I'll write them an email and ask them what they were thinking when they wrote this piece. All of those things are what encourage us to be continuing to create and want to share our music with others. And courage. Composers need courage, because share our music with others. And courage. Composers need courage, because next door in your office. And so that's I think everybody's experiencing the same thing that's out there trying to make a name for themselves.
Absolutely. And I liked that, Rebekah, you had mentioned that you love saying, oh, I know this composer. When you see the students playing that at a music festival, I do the same thing. And I often encourage students, record your piece and send it to the composer who is alive right now, because we can get their feedback and we can share that joy with other people. And I just think it's so special when students get to do that.
I love getting those emails of the video performance. And it's just so fun. So fun to see your music actually being learned by somebody. Because sometimes I sell a book and I don't make the connection that this is actually going to be played and learned. And then when I get the video, it makes it so much more real that my music is out there. Someone's actually practicing it. It's something it just makes me feel happy. I don't know.
Absolutely. And it's that boost of endorphins that, then you're inspired to continue to keep writing, right? Because you see that it's making a difference. I love that. That's so great. Do you all find it tricky to balance composing with teaching with, all of the many other musical things that you're doing? Or do you find that they sort of feed into each other?
I think there's a different combination that each composer has in terms of the teaching. I'm semi-retired, so I don't teach as much anymore. Some of them have a lot of students, 50 students a week. So I think our balance is different. So yes, it's a challenge. But I think juggling all those things is also part of the music business. I think that we have to keep our foot in each camp, as it were. And for Redleaf, unfortunately, Martha's had the brunt of the work in terms of the publishing, because our hard copy music is in her house. Okay. So when the orders come in for Redleaf, it's all been up to Martha, and it's just been too much of a load. Maybe, Martha, you could go on to discuss our next venture for international.
So up until now, Martha is the distributor for Redleaf Pianoworks, which actually I adore, because every time I get an order, I am, there's an affirmation there. We're doing the right thing. So selfishly, I get the orders, and, that feels like, okay, we've made a name. We're out there. We're doing our thing. And so I think the other composers have missed out a little bit, but I'm sure they haven't missed out on, saying to my husband, the post office is going to close at 3:00. You need to get the books out. Fortunately, Kingston's small, and I'm not far from the post office. It's worked out really well in Canada. It's harder to get our music into the U.S. because lots of times I'll get pictures of the packages when they arrive in the U.S., and I don't know who's been digging through those packages, but lots of times the music is damaged, and that's a whole nother ballgame. So we are actually, as of yesterday, launching a new distribution situation with 80 Days Publishing, a partnership with Christopher Norton. Everybody will know Christopher Norton, his colleague out of Edinburgh, Scotland, Andrew Jones. And they have figured out a way to use a print-on-demand global platform so if somebody orders a book in Kansas yesterday, that book will be printed in Kansas, mailed in Kansas, and hopefully it won't arrive damaged. And the shipping will be affordable. Or if somebody wants to buy it in Australia, they don't have to, call Redleaf and say, could you please send that book by, Susan Griesdale to me in Australia? And the shipping would cost, she could buy 10 books for the cost of the shipping. So we are so hopeful about that, because with the World Wide Web, everybody knows about our music, but not everybody can get our music. Yeah. And that's been for me the big deal. And I'm hoping that this will be really exciting.
That's great. And my publisher, Deborah Wanless Music, has also partnered with 80 Days. And so my book is available through them as well, or will be available if it's not at the moment. And so that's really great, because I love that model. And then it's also stimulating the local economy, because it's getting printed there and it's getting mailed there. And so I think it's just such a great model. It's very adaptable to the time that we're in.
Yeah. So, and thank goodness there are people who are smart enough and clever enough to figure out how to do that.
Yes, that's great. So what are some projects that each of you are working on right now? Can you let us in what's coming up for Redleaf and what you're working on?
I'll start. I just recently, I guess maybe in 2021, put out a series of dance books, 3 dance books, more at the advanced level. So for me, it's a bit of a quiet year for piano. I've just recently put out some violin and Pianoworks, which have done well. And I have this octatonic string trio that's been sitting in my to-do list for about 10 years now. So I'm thinking I really need to spend some time on it this year. So I might be branching away from piano a little bit, but I also want to go back into my art and my drawings. And I'm thinking of somehow putting them together and putting them out there. So little drawings, line drawings of dance. So that's sort of on my to-do list right now.
For me, I'm working on putting out a brand new e-sheet every month, a previously unpublished e-sheet. So when COVID hit, I started my Max Music Piano e-sheet club, and teachers can join for a very low price. I wanted to keep the price really low because I wanted to reach as many teachers as possible. So that keeps me on my toes. Every month I have to have a brand new piece published, edited, a video showing how to play it. Like there's quite a production, and then downloadable. Like we have all these. We have
all the steps,
and we have to check the boxes. But besides that, I've been really doing a little bit more artistic searching in my piano playing on a collection that I'm trying to publish called Shades of Blue. And in music, when you think of the word blue, you think of blues, but this isn't quite that. What I'm aiming for in this collection is a fusion between Impressionism and jazz. And I'm writing it basically in memory of my mother. Her favorite color was blue. And it's a collection of pieces with me kind of dealing with, my mom and I were best friends, but in the fallout after my parents both passed away and a very difficult estate situation with my family, just kind of dealing with the dynamics in my whole entire family. And so to me, writing this book is a little bit of music therapy. And so that's kind of where my soul is right now. That's my artistic project.
And for me, I have a couple of projects going on. I have a close, my collaborator that I've written a lot of art song and youth opera with, Janet Windler Ryan out of Kitchener-Waterloo. She lost her grandson recently, and she wrote a lot of poetry, and we have a plan to write a songbook called Jackson's Songbook. And I'm trying to get my courage up because I'm going to have to be really emotionally, with it to be able to do it. But I think it's going to be beautiful, and I can't wait to get started on it. And the piano pieces that I'm working on right now are in collaboration with my husband, who's an astrophysicist. They're all about the universe. And so it's going to be from beginner to advanced. And some of the titles are quasi-stellar, redshift. I'm pretty excited about that. And once I enter that world of that sound, if you think of a sound out of the Earth's atmosphere, it's like anything goes. It's just so exciting to be in that kind of tonal realm. So I'm pretty excited about that. And of course, Susan's going to do all of the illustrations.
That's fantastic. That sounds like an amazing project. Everything sounds so great. I'm looking forward to seeing those come out. Well, it's been a real pleasure getting to chat with the three of you. We're going to wrap up with a few rapid fire questions. No wrong answers. Just go with your gut. And then I think let's go in the order of I'm just going to go on my screen. Martha, Susan, Rebekah, if that works. What is a favorite piece or song to perform?
Oh, I love Dr. Gratis ad Parnassum by Debussy. That's one of my favorite pieces to perform. And also, of course, I am a Debussy crazy person. And sorry, I could go on, but okay, I'll stop there.
Okay, for me, because I'm not a performer, I think of my own music. And for me, my favorite dance piece is Wayward Waltz.
For me right now, I'm learning Haydn Sonata in E. So I go to my piano and it's got such beautiful clarity of tone. And I just, it's just so beautiful. And I love all those scales and I love the E major key. And I'm just loving that one right now.
It's a very joyful sonata. That's what I always think of. That's great. What is the best musical or career advice that you can pass on to up-and-coming musicians?
Okay, that's an easy one, and it's the hardest one. It's to do it every day, no matter how hard it is, no matter what else you're doing, if you're having to take care of kids, if you're having to worry about your day job. Most composers don't work full time. It's always something on the side. I would just say do it every day because you don't know maybe where you're going to wind up, But unless you put in the time, you're not going to hone those skills. You're not going to develop your voice. And so that's my big advice.
Yeah.
My advice is always believe in yourself, even if you don't. Always.
My best advice is to find the time of day when your creativity kind of comes to life. For me, I have discovered that right before bed, the hour right before bed is when I can be the most creative. So, but that might be different for everybody. So every artist should find that for themselves and then try to do it every day, like Martha says.
That's great advice. And I had a music teacher in high school, and she used to say that creativity is a muscle and you have to work it. And that was her way of saying, like, practice every day.
Yes.
What are you listening to right now?
Well, there are two things I'm listening to right now. My husband, who I said is a scientist, has decided in his retirement that he really is a rock and roll guy who plays guitar and sings in a band. Right now, he's singing with a group of people in similar situation as he, and they're playing lots of Beatles. They're doing lots of Tom Paxton, and I'm from Texas originally, so I am throwing out all these titles for pieces for music that I grew up with, progressive country, and it's so completely opposite the classical thing. But so I am listening to a lot of that because he's, so keen, and newfound talent of his. And also I'm listening to a lot of choral music because I'm trying to get my choir She Sings back on track this fall.
My answer to that's really quite different. I'm listening to my inner voice. I have to keep every day check in with that because it changes where I'm going all the time. And I find if I listen to a lot of music out there, I don't listen to what's going on inside because I'm in between projects. I'm listening very carefully. Where do I want to go next? So listening to my inner voice, best way I can put it.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
The most recent thing I Googled was, what is a breakdown? And so I discovered that a breakdown is when different instruments all take turns, like with banjo music. So I was listening to the Bonnie and Clyde car chase banjo music scene because there's a breakdown in there. And I was like, well, that's cool. So normally, though, I would listen to music that I'm going to be teaching to my piano students at this time of year. This is September. Normally, I'm listening to, what is this next piece all about? So
yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I will have links to everything we've talked about, links to Redleaf, links to all of your website and your wonderful music. And I really encourage people, if they have not encountered Redleaf Pianoworks and you are a piano teacher or a pianist yourself, you really do need to check it out because their music is fantastic. Thank you all for coming on. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much, Olivia.
Great to meet you, Olivia.
Great to meet you all. Thank you to the Saskatoon Symphony Orchestra for sponsoring this podcast. Make sure you head over to saskatoonsymphony.org to purchase tickets for upcoming shows. And if you don't live in the Saskatoon area, you can watch these shows via concert stream by following the link at the top of the website. I'm your host, Olivia Adams. This is Loud and Clear, and you can find me at OA Music Studios on socials. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.